See, it's through faith that we're saved. It's by faith that we come to a relationship with God. It's through believing that we're born again. It's amazing what God will do through faith. This is the new covenant. He said, my just people will live by faith. This is the prophecy of Habakkuk that was quoted in the New Testament. So in other words, God doesn't even require for us to be perfect. He knows that we're not going to be all loving. He knows that we're not going to have it all together and to have virtue. So what does he want from us? What does he require? Belief. Belief in God. So the first place to begin is an inner assent, a confidence, an assurance, first of all, that God exists. And then you move from believing that God is to, watch this, to something much deeper. I want you to believe in God, but let me ask you a question. What do you believe about God? What do I mean by that? Well, we just had that beautiful reading about who God is. You know, most people say, as I said, I believe in God Almighty, or I believe in my higher power, or I believe in the man upstairs, or I believe there's something out there somewhere. I've heard God referred to as a sugar daddy or something like that. But listen to how God revealed himself to Moses. See, we don't just believe in God, we believe who God is. See, true faith believes that he exists, but then faith comes to know God, like Jesus did in a personal way. Listen to how God revealed himself to Moses. The Lord, a God merciful and gracious, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness. So maybe you grew up in a very strict, harsh, black and white religion, and it could be Catholicism, it could be Protestantism, it could be any type of faith. And your vision of God is that God is harsh and mean and kind of out to get you. And if you break any of the rules or the laws, then he's going to be mad at you and he's going to throw you into the pit of hell. Well, I want to tell you that God is just. There will be a judgment. He does have standards. He does invite us to live his will. But more than anything, this is what I have encountered, that God is gracious. Gracious. God is a person. He's not just a higher power. He's not just almighty. Yes, he has all the power. But when you move through the stages of faith, you come from believing that he is to believing in who he is. And this is something that Jesus came to bring us, a personal relationship with God. And as I have come to faith, my initial step, the little mustard seed, was, yeah, I believe that God is. I dare to believe. Even though it doesn't look like it or seem like it sometimes with all the evil in the world, I dare to believe. And then I had this awakening to who God was. Gracious and merciful and forgiving and abounding in love and faithful. See, God is a good God. And that's what you have to believe about God. When you come to faith, you have to not just believe in God, as I've said, you have to believe that he's a good God. There's a story in the Old Testament, Genesis chapter 18, about Abraham and Sarah. Sarah was Abraham's wife. Now get this, Abraham's 100 years old. That's pretty old. Sarah's 90 years old. That's pretty old. And 3 angels came and said to Abraham, and Sarah overheard it, this time next year you're going to have a son. And Sarah laughed to herself. Well, that's interesting. Why did Sarah laugh? Because she felt that that was too much. Look how old she was. And it reminds me, again, of the angel Gabriel coming to Mary and saying that you're going to have a son because nothing is impossible with God. You know what the angel said? Is anything too wonderful for the Lord, when Sarah laughed? So sometimes, when it comes to some of the situations in our life, we can laugh. Like, for example, maybe you have a spouse that's not saved or not going to church, and you're thinking, can God bring that person back to church or to salvation? And maybe inside you chuckle or you laugh. Or maybe some of your children have fallen away from the faith. Do you laugh when you think about God bringing them back? Or perhaps you're struggling with an addiction. Do you laugh when you think that God can make you recover or bring you through that addiction. Or perhaps you're struggling with a business that's going downhill or unemployment, and do you laugh when you think about God? Is anything too wonderful for the Lord? He can bring you employment. He can bring your children back to the faith. He can bring your spouse to salvation. You see, what oftentimes we do is we handcuff God by our doubts, by our lack of expectancy. See, I want you to believe not just that God is and that He's a gracious God. I want you to believe that He can do everything in anything. See, that's what faith is. It's not just belief in doctrines. It's belief in the power of God. I remember one time I was going to preach a mission in a place called Fillmore, California. It's right off the coast of north of LA. And I had to fly to LA, and then I took a little plane out of LA to Oxnard, California. This is back years ago, about 15 years ago. And I'm on this little plane and we're taking off. And I had, there's about 5 people on the plane, and one of them was the pilot. And as we're taking off, all of a sudden, I got this sense that God was watching me. Nobody knew where I was. I was up here in the air over the Pacific Ocean in this little teeny plane. And I sensed that God's gracious hand was upon me. He knew as a missionary what I was doing. He had a destiny for me. And all of a sudden a song came to my mind. Maybe you've heard it. It's called, "I Believe I Can Fly." And the words are this: I'm leaning on the everlasting arms. There are miracles in life that I must achieve. But first I must know that it starts in me. And I can see it, then I can do it. If I can just believe it, then there's nothing to it. And then as the plane was banking, I remember thinking, I believe I can fly. I believe I can touch the sky, spread my wings and fly away. I believe I can soar, running through that open door. I believe I can fly. And you know what? Ever since that time, I believed in the graciousness of God for my life. I began to fly, preaching and writing and producing for TV, realizing my destiny. And you know what? I believe you can fly. See, that's what faith is all about. It's about coming to your potential, living with passion, becoming all that you can be, flying in life. See, that's what you have to believe about God. God has a destiny for you, and He wants you to become all that you can be. See, God's not just possibly, maybe out there somewhere. No, He exists. You get a personal relationship with Him. He's gracious, and then He wants to work in you and through you. I remember one time I was touring, just when I was thinking about getting on TV, I was touring a TV facility by a priest who was on TV, and he was showing me the studios and the cameras and all these different things. And I passed a little sign on a secretary's window that I'll never forget. And the sign said, "To expect a miracle." And I never forgot that. And I began to believe in miracles and expect God to be gracious to me and believe in His goodness for me. Don't just live with passion.